Welcome students. Today we are here to discuss about the poem Father to Son by Elizabeth Jennings. It's a part of the C.B.S.E Class XI curriculum, and today we are here with a short analysis of the poem. In fact, a very short analysis of the poem which covers the key aspects of this poem, and it would enable you to score better in the English paper. So let us start straight away. Now, when you look at the poem Father to Son by Elizabeth Jennings, generation gap is actually the center of attraction in this poem. A generation gap is a two-sided fact. It's just not a one-sided fact, it's a two-sided fact. It's a fact that every generation has to face this. Every generation has to go through this generation gap. Whether you are elder to your sister, or you are younger to your brother, or you're younger to your sister, the clash of generation gap continues throughout. In this case, it's not about brother and sister relations, it's about the relation of a father to a son. Okay, the poet has portrayed the generation gap between the father and his son clearly through this poem. Now, the poem basically brings forth a father's illusion towards his son. Father is seen as a helpless human being who, since his son's childhood, has been able to understand his son's emotional growth. But the father finds fault in his own son. It is also the father who is actually blamed. Where the father shows his incapability to understand his son, he at the same time reveals several unknown facts about his son. Now, this makes the situation of lack of understanding more ironical, and at this very irony puts questions to the father's integrity and ingenuity. As I said, that the generation gap is not something that is one-sided, it comes from both sides. When you expect someone to understand your point of view, you are also expected to become a bit liberal and try to look at the life from his aspect. Because if you have a biased or one-sided approach towards life, then there is no way of bridging this generation gap. This is what happens in this poem to some extent. The father finds fault with his son, but he never tries to judge him by placing himself in his position. Then probably this generation gap wouldn't have seemed so stark. So that is what is being said over here, and that is actually it becomes quite ironical, and that is why it questions the father's integrity and its ingenuity. Okay, now in the first stanza of the poem, The Father to Son by the Elizabeth Jennings, the poet shows the father saying that he has not succeeded in understanding his son because he himself could not grow up with his son. This might be because when the son was going differently, the father might have been busy in his course and would have kept himself aloof from the changes taking place in the outer world. So this often happens that fathers generally tend to spend less time with their children because they are busy with their activities of office and all that. And what has been said over here is that the father might have been busy with his own work, and that is why he couldn't pay proper attention to his son or provide or share a lot of time with his son. And then that is why he was aloof, or he kept himself away from the changes that were taking place around him. Now, the narrow-mindedness of the father might have stopped him from understanding the changes his son would have been experiencing. So, whatever changes take place in the outer world, they obviously have an effect on the children. Children tend to catch up with the changes very quickly, and often the parents are not able to keep track or not able to keep pace with the changes that are going on in a person in a child's mind, in a boy or girl's mind, and that is when the generation gap actually sets in. So the father was and the narrow-mindedness of the father probably stopped him from understanding or knowing about the changes that his son might have been experiencing while he was busy with his own work. But now, the father having failed to comprehend the height of his son's emotional growth, is making an attempt to understand him as a child instead of trying to know the changed world where his son is growing up. Now, the father tries to understand his son as a child. He is not trying to know the changed world. He's not trying to understand the situations in which the son is there. He's not trying to understand his circumstances and all the situation that he faces daily. He's trying to look at him as a child. He's not trying to look at the entire society or the entire world. Now, however, the type of relationship that the father now wants to develop with his son will do more harm than any good, for the father will always think that his son is still a little child and is so far not in such a condition when he is able to understand his actual person. Now the father actually thinks that the son is still a child, so obviously he is not uh, trying to understand the changes that have already taken place in the child, and that is why the problem sets in. Now, every father wants to design his child as per his own wish and desire. That is quite common. The parents generally try to impose the desires, impose their own wishes, their own unfulfilled wishes on their children, and the father is trying to design his child as per his own convenience and as per his own wish and desire. But it is bound to go astray most of the times and becomes what he wants to. The children generally are quite liberal minded, and they are not swayed by any opinions that are tried to be imposed on them by their parents. So it doesn't go on well over here. The son decides to become what he wants to. Now the father thinks that when he grew the seed of his son, he expected him to grow and take branches under his shade, but now when he has fully grown up, it seems that all his expectations from his son are in vain. Now the son has developed a personality of his own. The father expected that when his son grows, then he will always cast a careful observation on him. But when the son actually develops a liberal identity, when the son tries to carve a new identity for him, to carve a new niche for him, that is when the problems set in, and the father realizes that all his expectations from his son are in vain. Whatever attempts he made and whatever pains and protections he took and gave his son while he was growing are now in vain, because he now wants to design his life according to his own ways, which is quite natural. That now the son is not trying to be a part of his father's design. He is not actually uh, trying to act in line with what his father wishes him to do. He has developed a new way of life. He wants to design his life according to his own wishes and own ways. He is not going to be subdued by his father's wishes, nor is he going to be guided and swayed by his father's opinion. So when he presents or asserts his own point of view, that is when the problem set in, and he doesn't expect his father to do any kind of interference in his life. This is really a very pathetic situation for a father who has actually acted like a gardener. He has nourished the plant, he has nourished the flower right through his life. The child grew up under his shade, under his protection, but now he feels to be left behind because of the generation gap that has come about with the changing world. The world has changed, the son has changed, the son has grown up, and it's difficult for the father to keep pace with it. It's difficult for the father to realize this simple fact that his son is no more a child. The poet says that the father and the son now behave like strangers in their own house. They share the same house, but they behave like strangers because they don't get along well. The point of views clash. Okay, the mindset doesn't match, and it is hardly possible that they would ever be able to understand each other, because the generation gap is so stark that it is very much improbable that they are ever going to bridge this generation gap. And the land that once used to belong to the father is now all for the son, who wants to walk, talk, and live his own way. There is almost no sign of understanding between them. Now, the poet also shows that the self-centeredness of the father, who, though wishes to design his son's life according to his own, when it comes to sharing what his son likes and feels pleasure in, he avoids revealing it. Okay, so now this is actually a selfish nature of the father being revealed here. The generation gap is not caused just as it is, because there is a genuine reason behind the generation gap. Because when the father wants his son to shape his life as per his father's wishes, then he is okay. But when the time comes for him to share what his son likes and dislikes, what he hates, what he finds pleasure in, then he is not willing to do it. He is reluctant to share all those things. Where he once used to think that his son would not be able to design his life, but it's time to talk about his son's preferences, he feels ashamed of revealing them. His son's preferences, they do not find any importance in the life of the father at all, and that is a key or vital point in order to initiate the make this generation gap very stark and beyond repair. The relationship has worsened beyond repair, and this generation gap has made the father and son strangers to each other. Now, here, what he loves may mean to things, trends, and people that his son loves. And when he says, "I cannot share," it may mean a lot. Yes, it would either be that the bad things or good things of his child, or the self centeredness of the father, who has now developed as a kind of anger or hatred to what his son likes. Now, actually, the father has developed a kind of hatred to what his son likes, and that is why this generation gap has widened. Now, there is also something else that you need to know about this. Uh, when it comes to when he was thinking earlier, what he's doing now is, when it comes to speaking good things about his son, he's shying away from that. But he wants his son to shape his life according to his will. Now, how could you avoid talking about the seed that you planted with much care and consciousness? Now, reading on, it can be realized that all the concerns and worries that the father was showing was nothing but affectation of love towards his son. Now, as we go on, the father is shown in a very callous form, which is not expected from any father on this earth. Now, it's quite surprising that uh, what the father was in the first and second stanza, and how he gradually changes. No father in his senses would ever wish his son to go away from him and destroy his life. Why would a father want his son to get lost and struggle for his life? But this is the father who wishes so. In this case, the father wishes that his son goes away to get lost and struggle for life. He wishes that his son should go away from him and return like the prodigal son in the Bible, the ideal son that everyone wishes. But ideal things don't exist in practical life. That is what the father fails to understand. This sort of carelessness on the father's part towards his son shows that he has never loved his son. However, if we take it the other way, it will come to a knowledge that the father wishes his son to live and struggle so that his child can learn about the bitterness of his life and become mature after having encountered the ups and downs of his life. That means, so long the father has been acting as a protection, as a protective shield for the son, shielding him from all the blows and buffets of the hard life that he has faced, when he had to face, but he didn't face that because his father was there to act as a protective gear, or as a protective shield. But now he wants his son to go away to work on his own, to face the blows of life, bitterness of life on his own, and then return as a matured son, having encountered all the ups and downs of life. Now he wants his son to return like a matured man who is full of experience. This wish of the father may also be because of the tenderness and innocence that his child is going through. Now, whatever be the case, whatever be the reason, the father wishes, so he must stand by his child through thick and thin and help him to know about life. Though most of the things the things are known by the human beings itself, but if you can share your experience with your child, it will not only help him go ahead, but also help him take a wise decision when it comes to any hardship in life. However, we must know that to err is human. A father is expected to share his experiences with his son so that he is better equipped to face the world. But to err is human, people make mistakes, and mistakes are the greatest teacher in life. And in the last stanza of the poem, the poet doesn't present what is expected from it. It does talk about the reconciliation but doesn't give any permanent solution. The father is shown and left lamenting and complaining but doesn't want to provide any solution. Similarly, the son is also shown to be ready to reconcile and live again as they used to live earlier, but this does not end the problem of generation gap that remains between the father and the son. Therefore, as a sign of reconciliation, each of them welcomes one another to live friendly. Now, there is a sort of reconciliatory tone at the end, in the last stanza. The father and the son decide to live with each other. They decide to reconcile their differences, and they welcome each other into the life, in each other's life. Uh, Try to bridge the gap a little, but there is no permanent solution to the problem of generation gap. There is no assurance that this problem would not crop up again in the future. Now, some people who read the poem, they may deject and resent on this reconciliatory solution. Reconciliation may not be a permanent solution for them, but there is hardly any solution to the generation gap. That is the biggest problem. At least a temporary gesture of reconciliation at the end, that seems the most viable option, because there is hardly any permanent solution to generation gap. There has always been generation gap, and it will be so for the future generations as well. Now the only thing that we can do is to understand the feelings of each other, and to respect each other, but not be crossed, but we not be forgotten and not be crossed, and not try to interfere too much in each other's life. So that is the best thing that we can do. So reconciliation to end the poem, a temporary gesture of reconciliation to end the poem, to end the poem, may be the best option, or the most viable option that was possible for the poet to do, and he has done that. So, generation gap, that cannot be cured. This problem cannot be done away with totally. But if people can respect their feelings, respect each other's feelings, and try to actually understand each other a bit, this problem uh, can be contained, if not solved totally. So that was what the poem said. I guess the analysis will provide you some help to understand the poem in a better way and answer your papers when it comes to doing so. Thank you. Thank you for joining the session, and all the best to every one of you. Thank you.